Be ready.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Dr. Praveen, let's start. Thank you, Verghese, for the introduction and for inviting me to conduct this clinic for the students. Praveen, you can read
Okay, sir.
the case detail
Okay, sir.
that is put on this.
Okay, sir. So case details. 22-year-old male, college student, informant patient, history is reliable, came with presenting complaints of recurrent periumbilical abdomen pain for past 1 year, intermittent loose stool for past 1 year, weight loss of 5 kg in 1 year, and pain in the perineal area followed by pus discharge for the past 1 month.
So, Praveen,
Yes, sir.
if this is the presenting complaints given by this patient, how would
Okay, sir.
you go ahead if the patient was in front of you? How would you elicit a history from this patient? What are the things you would ask for this patient in the total history? You can carry on. You can give
Okay.
us.
First I would like to expand the abdomen pain history, sir, regarding whether recurrent pain means the pain onset and the site of the pain, and whether any aggravating or relieving factors is there or not, and the interval in the past 1 year, how many times he had abdomen pain, whether it is associated with any food intake or any patient pain relieving with bowel movements and all. I need to expand in that abdomen pain history, sir.
Okay, carry on.
Then with the loose stools, I would like to ask the exact frequency patient is having per day and the consistency of the loose stools, as well as any associated with any blood.
This meeting is being recorded.
Any pus or blood discharges is there in the loose stools, and whether patient is having any pain during defecation or bowel movement, and associated with any precipitating with any food or any intake is there or not also, I would like to ask. And weight loss of 5 kg, whether the patient having any intentional weight loss or any reduced food intake history is there or not, I would like to ask. And regarding the perineal area for the past 1 month, it is there for pus discharge is also there. So any patient is having any other symptoms like fever, any previous past history of any other discharges is there or not, I would like to ask.
That all that you would like to ask in the presenting history?
Yes, I would want to elaborate these complaints first. Then I would like to ask whether patient is having similar kind of illness before, or any vomiting or abdomen discomfort, blow distension is there or not, I would like to ask. Then amount and quantity of stools, it will come in loose stools.
When a person has got abdominal
treatment
pain,
history, any drug intake and treatment history in the past 1 year, whether patient had any workup done anywhere, and if whether patient is on any other medications also, I would like to ask, sir.
so why did you ask for a history of vomiting and you didn't give a lot of points on the vomiting? What other elaboration would you like to do on the vomiting?
Vomiting, if, whether the vomiting is having coexisting along with any pain or loose stools, or whether the patient is able to take food intake, content of vomiting.
On the vomiting part.
Content of the vomiters, whether any food or any bilious or blood is there, that also I would like to ask.
Stale food?
Stale food or undigested food. Bilious content is there or not also, I would like to ask.
Anything else? When a person comes with this abdominal pain and vomiting, any other history in the past you would like to ask?
Any history of any abdomen surgery underwent in the past also, I would like to ask, sir. Any history of surgery done for any abdominal illnesses?
Okay, Dr. Ismail, you would like to ask something on the history? Anything that you would like to comment or ask?
I would say that when you say you ask for all this history, why you are asking for it? Actually, what was the thought process when you asked for all this? For example, when you said stale food vomitus, what did you have in your mind?
Sir,
Could you explain a little more further there? Because just by asking it, what is the purpose of asking? You should know why you are asking for a particular symptom.
yes, sir. That actually I thought of any small bowel obstruction or anything patient may have at the time. They may have vomitus with stale food. So that was in my mind.
What do you mean by stale food vomitus when you say stale food?
Stale food means patient partially digested food with foul smelling content. But the food which has been taken 1 or 2 days before.
Praveen,
Sir?
when you had this history of periumbilical pain, what are all the conditions that went through your mind? Only then you can get a proper history. What are the conditions that went through your mind if a person comes to you with periumbilical pain?
Sir, patient with periumbilical abdomen pain, I first thought of any small bowel obstruction or any GI infection, gastroenteritis or infections, or I thought of any mesenteric ischemia kind of pain. And
Praveen, when you say periumbilical abdominal pain, from which all organs are involved when you say periumbilical pain? Then we will come to what are the etiologies of the pain. Which all organs are involved when you say periumbilical abdominal pain?
Sir, it can be come from small bowel, or it can be also from the colon, or it can come from the vascular structures. I mean, bowel vascular structures. It can be related to.
When you say small bowel, which all small bowel? And when you say colon, which all colon actually?
In small bowel, it can be periumbilical region more in ileal and jejunal inflammation can come in the periumbilical region, sir. Not only inflammation, any pathology in the jejunum or ileum. And when related to large bowel, it can be from the ascending colon cecal pathologies can have a pain in the periumbilical region, sir.
Is it only in the bowels that you get the pain and the mesentery? Is there any other structures in the center, periumbilical area?
Mesentery and vasculature also.
Yeah, that you told. Anything else?
Transverse colon.
No, that you told. What about the umbilicus itself? You also have an umbilicus. You have skin over the umbilicus.
Yes, sir.
Periumbilical pain can also come from there. So when you ask causes of periumbilical pain, the organs can be the small bowel, it can be the proximal large bowel, it can be mesentery, it can be blood vessel, it can be even skin, even herniation. Umbilical hernias can produce a periumbilical pain.
Okay, sir.
Okay. I think we will go further.
About investigations,
No, we will come to that.
Did he ask for any history of investigations during this 1 year period?
Yes, ma'am. No, past history of anything, patient had any medications or treatment taken
not
also.
Medication. I'm not talking about medication. Investigations.
Or any treatment history has been done or not
treatment. I'm asking you about investigations. I'm not asking about treatment.
Okay, ma'am. I would like to ask if any patient had any endoscopy or radiological imaging has been done in the past also. I would like to ask.
Exactly, and he's a college student. Supposing he gives you a diagnosis, would it be of help to you? Because 1 year history, he's an educated person. So I think that's very important that, what investigations you had, whether any confirmed diagnosis was there. I think all these would give a clue that the whole history may change over to a known case and then it will come towards management. So I think that's quite important. Okay. Nutrition, you asked about the deficiencies.
Yes, from weight loss is there. So I would like to.
Weight loss, not weight loss, micro and macronutrient deficiency.
Okay, that also.
The other two things are, you didn't talk about GI bleed. Was there melena? Was there blood in the stool?
Blood in stools.
Is it important?
Yes, sir. Blood in stools is important, sir. That I told melena, I didn't say, but loose stools, content of stool blood is there or not. I would like to.
That is a different area. Then what about when you look at periumbilical pain, vomiting, loose stools? You should also ask for. You didn't ask about joint pains or any extra intestinal manifestations, symptoms.
Okay.
As well as systemic
Is another.
symptoms.
And even fever,
Yes, fever, I think he said. Did you say fever?
Yes, sir. Fever, I said, sir.
Okay.
What about the loose stool? You gave a history of loose stools. It was you didn't give a full proper history. When a person says loose stools for 1 year, what is the definition of chronic diarrhea?
Sir, any loose stools beyond more than 4 weeks of duration will come in the chronic diarrhea.
So this is a chronic diarrhea.
Yes, sir.
When a person gives history of chronic diarrhea, what goes through your mind? What are the differences?
Sir, I would like to detail about the nature of the stool, whether it is a watery stool or bloody stool.
Not that. What are the principles that go through your mind?
I would like to differentiate between whether the diarrhea is whether small bowel or large bowel origin.
So the history that you gave was actually a little. It's sort of bunched up thing. You couldn't really make out from your history. So history, whether you are talking about small or large. What are the small bowel diarrhea features? Can you give me?
Yes, sir. Usually, small bowel diarrhea, the quantity of stool will be large in amount, and it may be foul smelling, and the frequency will be very less than compared to large bowel diarrhea. So, whereas in the large bowel diarrhea, the quantity.
Give a number. Give a number on the frequency.
Frequency
less than so many.
3 to 4 per day.
Okay, less than 3 to 4 per day. Okay, then.
If in case of large bowel diarrhea, patient will have
anything else in small bowel
associated with a foul smelling stool, then the quantity of stool will be large. Will be this. Maybe
repeating the same thing.
Floating of stools in the faucet. Presence of.
And what about the large bowel?
Whereas the large bowel diarrhea, usually the patient will have the frequency will be very more, and they have associated with the incomplete evacuation feeling. They have associated with a small quantity whenever the patient goes to bathroom. Urgency, history of urgency will be there.
What about pain?
Painful defecation also come. Bleeding, blood in stools also very common with the large bowel diarrhea.
Come to this later. So when you talk about loose stools or chronic diarrhea, you have to give it in such a way that the examiner easily makes out what you're thinking. Okay, I think. And what about this perianal area pus discharge? What thoughts went through your mind?
It could be possible of any fistula or any perianal infection, which is related to the chronic diarrhea thing. Probably I thought of any inflammatory bowel disease like Crohn's.
No, we are not going into all that. When you say something in the perineal area which is discharging pus, immediately you think of a fistula?
Perianal infection is the first I thought. Perianal infection.
So what is it called? It is not called perianal infection.
Perianal abscess. Perianal abscess.
Okay. Perianal area swelling with pus discharges and abscess. We will go to the next slide.
Past history. Patient.
You didn't tell us anything. You have already gone through all this, I think. You didn't tell us about pulmonary tuberculosis.
Pulmonary tuberculosis.
Cough. Respiratory symptoms you didn't say. Allergies is another history which you should have mentioned with this history. Did you tell about the personal history? I didn't hear that.
No, I.
Is that important?
Okay, sir. Sexual exposure.
Not only that, what about alcohol or smoking? Is that
Smoking.
important in this?
Yes, sir.
So when you give a history, it should be thorough.
Okay.
You should touch upon all points. Okay. So now that we have gone through this, we will give you the history, what we got from the patient. You can read it.
Okay, sir. The
Yes,
patient. Yes, sir. History of illness. Incidence onset abdomen pain, which is periumbilical, colicky, 1 to 2 hours after the food, which lasts for 15 to 30 minutes, occurring once or twice per week initially. The frequency of pain increased gradually over the next 3 months. Now has pain almost daily with increased severity, requiring medications. Pain was induced by eating heavy meals. He also noticed occasional tendency to go to toilet during episode of pain, which gave partial relief from pain. Along with increase in severity of pain, he used to get vomiting, which was 2 to 3 times per week, which used to occur 1 to 2 hours after a meal. The vomitus was bilious and consists of semi-digested material. Significant relief of pain with vomiting is there. He also had a ball rolling sensation in the central abdomen at the height of pain.
So now that you have got, this is the old description of the pain.
Okay.
What does this, okay, we'll come to that later. Okay, carry on, read this also.
He also had an increase in bowel movement 2-3 times daily. Earlier bowel frequency was 1 per day with loose stools on and off since the onset of symptom. The stools are semi-solid at times watery, small to medium volume with no obvious blood or mucus. There was no tenesmus. He has not noticed any relation of diarrhea with eating any particular type of food. He had occasional nocturnal diarrhea. He has noticed weight loss of 5 kg over 3 months. There is no fever, cough, or anorexia. For these symptoms, he was evaluated.
Okay, it's all right.
Yes.
So just a question on this. When you looked at the small bowel diarrhea, the diarrhea, it's quite a good description of the diarrhea. What do you think is diarrhea? Small bowel or large bowel? How do you classify chronic diarrhea? Can you tell me how you classify chronic diarrhea? What are the types of chronic diarrhea?
So, chronic diarrhea we can classify into watery diarrhea, fatty diarrhea, or bloody or inflammatory diarrhea. So, based upon the content of the stool.
There are many more. There are about 5 types, 5 or 6 types.
Then,
what about osmotic diarrhea?
Secretory diarrhea, osmotic diarrhea.
What is osmotic diarrhea? What are the conditions associated with osmotic diarrhea?
Sir, osmotic diarrhea occurs when there is a increased intake of non-digestive materials content like magnesium or phosphate ions or any laxatives.
What is the most common cause of osmotic diarrhea as an illness?
Illness is laxative. Apart from that,
not laxative, as an illness. Okay,
lactose
malabsorption. So that is osmotic diarrhea. The second is secretory diarrhea. What is the other name for secretory diarrhea? You said watery diarrhea, secretory diarrhea. So what are the characteristic of a secretory diarrhea?
Secretory diarrhea usually it is due to secretion of the electrolytes into the lumen.
What are the characteristics? Clinical characteristics.
Patient will have watery diarrhea with associated electrolyte abnormalities. Species of
I'm talking about clinical characteristics. When a person gives a description of the diarrhea, what is it described as? What is the volume?
Volume will be large volume stools with high frequency.
Again, when you say large volume, 500 ml is large volume for one person. 1 liter maybe for another. So you need to give a figure. Okay, second is you need to go and read it up.
Okay, sir.
Secretory diarrhea is there. Then third, inflammatory diarrhea, you said. What are the characteristics of an inflammatory diarrhea?
Inflammatory diarrhea usually the stools is mixed with blood and mucus, and patient have pain associated with bowel movements, and patient may have other features of like inflammation like fever or.
Okay, so that is the third. Then fourth is fatty diarrhea.
Yes, sir. Fatty diarrhea, the patients used to have
That I already
long-term.
told.
Yes, sir.
You told this to you when we talked about small bowel. And then you have motility type of diarrhea. So there are 5 types of diarrhea. And
Okay.
the more clinical orientation is small bowel versus large bowel. And you already described it. So this diarrhea which you have got here, what do you think it is? Is it small or large?
So it is like small bowel diarrhea, sir, because the patient's frequency is around 3 times daily, and there was no tenesmus, and the stool is semi-solid and watery in content. It's small to medium in volume, and there is no
So I
urgency.
thought you said small, medium volume is favoring large bowel diarrhea.
Yes, yes. Usually frequency will be there, but there is no obvious blood or mucus, and there is no tenesmus and all, which is against large bowel diarrhea.
So, yeah. So what I would have said is there are some features of small bowel and some features of large bowel.
Large bowel, okay.
Isn't it? Okay. Anything else, Syed Ismail, anything you want to ask him up to here?
What do you think about the vomiting and abdominal pain due to?
So the patient had an abdominal pain and he had a vomiting along with that pain, and sometimes even the pain is relieving with vomiting, like that history was there. The pain was also induced by heavy meals, and the vomiting was 2 to 3 times per week. So this vomiting content is also bilious, which contains semi-digested material. So this implies that there could be a possibility of intestinal obstruction, which is getting relieved with vomiting, sir.
So what do you think that where is the level of obstruction?
Since the vomiting content is bilious and semi-digested material, it is at the level of jejunum.
It is a jejunal obstruction. Is it jejunum or ileum or duodenum?
It could be in the jejunum or ileum, sir, but most likely in the jejunum, because vomiting.
If it is jejunum, what is the usual symptom of a jejunal obstruction, a proximal small bowel obstruction? What is the symptom as compared to a distal small bowel obstruction? That is very important question.
Yes, sir. Usually the proximal small bowel obstructions, the patients will have a early onset of vomiting with contains semi-digested food material, and the onset also will be sudden with pain in the epigastric region. The content of the vomiting also bilious or bilious content will be there. Usually the abdomen distension will not be much with the proximal obstruction. Whereas in the distal obstruction, the patient
So
will.
what you said is correct. Does this vomit that he has have the characteristics of a proximal small bowel obstruction? Because you told me it's jejunal.
Okay, sir.
What is the vomiting? It is very severe. And the frequency of the vomit, how many times usually they vomit?
Usually they will have some after taking meal within 2 to 3 hours, the patient will develop vomiting because if there's a complete obstruction is there.
Question is the frequency of vomit, the number of times. Here it is 2 to 3 times per week. In a
Yes, sir.
proximal obstruction, will it be 2 to 3 times per week?
No, sir. Usually it will be there after every meal. But if there is any
very frequent vomit. And what is the complication of proximal obstruction? they became dehydrated and electrolyte abnormalities.
Electrolyte abnormalities will come.
So that is not the history that we see here.
Okay.
And how do you explain ball rolling sensation? How do you explain all that? The frequency only 2 to 3 times. So is it jejunal obstruction or is it a distal small bowel obstruction?
Usually the ball rolling sensation and all will come in the distal bowel obstructions.
This looks like
It
a
can-
distal obstruction, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Distal small bowel obstruction. And what is the characteristic of the vomit contents in a distal small bowel obstruction?
Sometimes vomiting will be very late the symptom, and they may contain feculent materials in the vomiting, sir, usually.
What about a colonic obstruction? What are the symptoms?
Usually, colonic obstruction patients will present with a severe abdomen distension and pain. Vomiting will be very less common symptom in a colonic obstruction, sir. And if the patient develops vomiting, it will contain a more of a feculent material will be there, and the retrograde movement of the feces will be there, sir, through the ICU.
Colonic obstruction, distension is the main thing.
Yes, sir.
The small bowel obstruction, vomiting is there. A lot
Yes,
of
sir.
vomiting in proximal, less vomiting in distal. Ball rolling sensation, distension, all that comes with a distal small bowel.
Okay, sir.
Can I go on, Syed?
Yes, sir. Carry on.
So we will now go on to further history of what happened. As Dr. Jayanti said, some tests have been done. You can go through it,
Okay, sir.
Ravi.
For the symptom, he was evaluated by tests including CT scan and colonoscopy. He was told that his problem was most probably tuberculosis of the intestine, and he was given ATD for 9 months. Patient took 4 drugs for 2 months, followed by 2 drugs for 7 months. Tolerated well. He was compliant in taking the drugs. His symptoms improved but did not disappear completely. He had recurrence of similar pain after about 5 months of ATT, occurring 1 to 2 times per week initially, and gradually increasing to almost daily over next 3 months, with features almost similar to the earlier pain, but less severe. There was no vomiting, but he used to pass loose stools volumes twice daily, no tenesmus. He completed ATD 3 months ago. While on ATD, he gained 3 kg of body weight initially, but lost 2 kg again by the time he finished ATD. Spain was continuing even after ATD completion. He was re-evaluated by repeat colonoscopy. He was told that his ulcers are persisting and new drugs were added. After about 2 months of taking the new drugs, he noticed dull aching, persistent pain in the perineal area 1 month ago with a small tender swelling initially, which burst after a few days discharging pus. Pain in the perineal area was reduced significantly after pus discharge. He was given antibiotics for 1 week, with which the discharge disappeared. But since last 1 week, he has noticed the pus discharge again.
What do you think in the history made this doctor start this patient on ATT? Patient has an ATT scan and a colonoscopy. So what do you think made the physician start the patient, make the patient start the patient on ATT?
Ma'am, patient had a past history of pulmonary tuberculosis mentioned in the history, ma'am. So
No.
Come on, yeah,
No, no. There was no past history of pulmonary.
right.
No, there's no past history of pulmonary TB.
okay, sir. Okay.
Patient had the CT scan, patient has had a colonoscopy, and the doctor started the patient on ATT. So what is your inference? On one side, you had partial small bowel obstruction, proximal. What do you think in the CT or colonoscopy made the doctor consider the need for a ATT? That's my question.
Patient may had ulcers involving the ileum and ileocecal valve region. Along the CT showed features of any strictures or inflammation in the small bowel also. So with being a high endemic country, they would have considered, and the biopsy detail was not. Biopsy may showed features of granulomas, caseating granulomas, so they would have gone with ATT.
Jayanti will later on we are going to show the investigations that have been done, actually the results of those investigations. We can have a little discussion at that time as to why a diagnosis of TB was made. So with this, we go to the next. Carry on, go through.
Past illness, no history of TB in the past, no other significant illness in the past. Family history, there's no significant family history. Personal history, appetite mildly reduced, bladder habits are normal, sleep is normal, occasional smoking and alcohol intake. Nutrition, diet requirement was 1800 kilocalories, intake was around 1500 kilocalorie. ECOG performance status 1. Uh,
1 minute. Okay. Just ask you a few questions. The patient was treated for TB. Can you give me the prevalence or how often do you see perianal TB, perianal disease in TB?
So usually perianal disease is around 1 to 2%. They can come with the perianal disease, with the tuberculosis.
This is your guess or
Less than 5%, like that.
Okay. Is it more common in TB or is it more common in Crohn's?
More common with Crohn's, sir.
More common with Crohn's. We'll come to that disease later.
Okay, sir.
This question I want to ask you, see, at the end of 5 months, he initially, when they started the anti-TB treatment, he showed improvement.
Okay,
5 months into treatment, he developed symptoms, abdominal pain and diarrhea. But they continued the ATT up to 9 months.
Yes.
Normally, is this the standard of care when you treat with ATT and in between they have recurrent symptoms? What does one normally do? Do they just continue up to 9 months treatment? Or if you are the doctor looking after, what would you have done?
Sir, actually, if the ATT was started at the end of intensive phase, we can reassess the patient for symptom. If the patient is having improvement in symptoms, then we can continue. If they have persistent symptoms, then we can do further colonoscopy to assess the lesion or ulcer which is there, whether it is improving or not. And based upon that, we can switch over the treatment. And if the patient is, this patient had, after 5 months, he developed abdominal pain and diarrhea, which was similar in the characteristic to the previous episodes. So at the time, I would have stopped ATT and I would have reworked up with further imaging or scopy to reassess, and I would have reconsider the continuing of ATT, sir.
Would you have considered an upper GI endoscopy at that time with the colon?
Yes, sir. Upper GI endoscopy. Because if it is a Crohn's disease, then patient may have some other features which can be seen in the upper GI scopy, sir, which would have given me a clue. And chest X-ray.
What are these features? No, upper GI endoscopy. You cannot get off by saying some other features. You must say what features?
After ulcers, presence of ulcers or any strictures can be seen in the.
If you find macroscopically it is normal, will you be satisfied?
No, sir. Biopsy, if there is any ulcer, anything. Biopsy
macroscopically normal.
Biopsy from the
dude. If you take a biopsy, where will you take the biopsy, and what are you looking for in the biopsy?
From the small intestine, duodenum will take and look for any granulomas.
No, not small intestine. From the stomach. Where in the stomach?
Okay, sir. And
okay. What percentage of people have gastric lesions when you have a normally macroscopically normal stomach?
Percentage.
No, anyway, you can look it up. There was a publication from CMC many years ago. Chest X-ray. Would you like?
I was asking about focally enhancing gastric.
Pardon?
Praveen,
Sir,
among the
Focally,
two,
yeah, I was
Hello?
asking, talking about focally enhanced gastritis.
Praveen,
sir.
among the two symptoms, abdominal pain and diarrhea, which is more alarming to you that the drug is not working?
Abdomen pain, sir.
Why?
Patient is developing pain because there may be a persisting intestinal obstruction, may be ongoing. So, which I
So
would
it
like.
could be tubercular stricture, which is causing obstruction, which is not going to improve with your ATT.
Yes, sir.
If it is a fibrostenotic lesion,
Yes,
so
yes, sir.
it is not going to improve with your ATT.
Yes, sir.
So basically the diarrhea part, because it is the mucosal involvement, which is
Okay.
causing the diarrhea part.
Okay, sir.
Do you know of any publications on ATT treatment and the natural history of the stricture? There is a old article by
Okay.
Dr. A.C. Anand from GV Pant and a more
Okay.
recent article from AIMS.
Sure, sir. I'll check it, sir. I have not gone
Check
through.
that because they are diametrically opposite results. The Dr. A.C. Anand's article said that if you give ATT, tubercular strictures improve and very few people went for surgery. Diametrically opposite result from AIMS in a recent publication. But I think some patients may improve, but others will continue.
There is one publication, sir, which shows 1/3 will improve, 1/3 will be static, and 1/3 will worsen.
I think that is the Macaria's article, I think, from AIMS. But if you look at AC Anand's article, not AC Anand, this is the Satrajit, who was in GV Pant many years ago, maybe 20, 25, 30 years ago. He had given some long strictures which opened up after ATT. Anyway, that's a different thing, but that's something to look at. Yeah. Can you summarize your history?
Yes, sir. So here we have a young male with a history of a chronic abdomen pain with chronic diarrhea associated with weight loss and non-responding to ATT, non-responsive to antituberculous treatment with recurrence of symptoms.
A little sketchy. It would have been better, like vomiting you didn't mention. And it was
Perianal disease.
Perianal discharge. Perianal discharge.
Yeah, perianal disease.
Large bowel type of
And
disease.
also say about the
Small bowel.
systemic, if there is
Yeah.
any systemic or extraintestinal manifestations or not.
Okay. With no systemic or extraintestinal manifestations.
I think it should be the summary. If somebody comes late, like an examiner comes late and sits there, your summary should be able to make him get the gist of the whole history. But what history you said, it's a bit ragged, you know. Just for your information, this is probably like this. Read it.
It's a 20-year-old male with periumbilical colicky pain with occasional bilious vomiting associated with large bowel type of intermittent diarrhea and weight loss. Initial diagnosis
This
intestinal
should be small bowel type of it.
small bowel. Initial diagnosis intestinal TB and put on ATT. After initial improvement, he developed a similar pain and diarrhea and continues to lose weight. He was put on new medication since the last 2 months after repeat colonoscopy. Since the last 1 month, he has perineal pain and discharge. He has no extraintestinal symptoms.
This gives a very concise picture of the whole thing. Okay, the summary should be like this, not like what you said. And when you summarize, don't repeat the whole history, just the salient, important points in the history. Okay, we'll go to, can you give us a syndromic diagnosis?
My syndromic diagnosis will be a chronic intestinal obstruction with the diarrhea with perianal abscess Not responding to ATT, probably involving distal small bowel. First differential diagnosis will be Crohn's disease.
Let's
Then
just repeat it again. The first line, we'll go through it. What you said, the first line you said.
chronic intestinal obstruction, chronic intestinal
Again,
obstruction
there
with
I'll stop
diarrhea.
you there. I'll stop you there. You should say chronic, which part of the intestine, small or large?
Chronic
small
small
intestinal
intestinal
obstruction.
obstruction.
Isn't it? It's not a large intestinal. Chronic small intestinal obstruction. And there you must say, where is the site of obstruction? Is it proximal small bowel or distal small bowel?
Distal small bowel.
Distal small bowel. Okay. Carry on.
With the
Then-
chronic diarrhea and perineal abscess, which is
Again,
not.
when you say diarrhea, the diarrhea is already given in the history.
Yes, sir.
Syndromic diagnosis is, you must say what type of diarrhea? Is it a small bowel
chronic
diarrhea,
small
large
bowel.
bowel diarrhea?
Small bowel diarrhea.
What type you think?
Small bowel diarrhea.
Okay.
And perineal infection, perineal
Again, you're
abscess,
saying the same thing.
perineal abscess, which is not responding to ATT.
And your differentials?
My first differential diagnosis will be Crohn's disease. Second, maybe drug resistant tuberculosis possible, or any eosinophilic enteritis also possible, sir.
Anything else?
Any malignant condition like lymphomas or small bowel tumors also I would like to consider.
You had, when you put your differentials, it should be in the order of priority.
Yes.
The order of priority, first one you said Crohn's. Second is drug-resistant TB. Then you said eosinophilic enteritis. No? Is that common, eosinophilic enteritis? Have you seen any case?
No, sir.
So it's uncommon. What about lymphoma? Have you seen any lymphomas?
Yes, sir. Lymphomas I have seen.
You have seen. So lymphoma should come earlier than an eosinophilic enteritis. What are the other causes of diarrhea with subacute obstruction?
Doesn't that patient may have any?
Okay, I think that's reasonable. Do you know the prevalence of drug-resistant TB in India?
Percentage?
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, it's very
Praveen,
common disease.
Sir, tell me, sir.
Praveen, is it common to get my MDR tuberculosis in extrapulmonary site?
No, sir. Usually, lung will have MDR.
Okay, and if you are suspecting MDR tuberculosis, what history you should have been asked? You should ask.
Patient have worsening of other sites involvement like lung involvement, cough, sputum production.
No. Usually, when you treat extrapulmonary tuberculosis, MDR tuberculosis arises when the patient is not compliant or non-adherent to it.
Okay,
Primary MDR tuberculosis of extrapulmonary sites are very rare.
Okay, sir.
Are you considering NSAID enteropathy?
Patient history of NSAID drugs is not there, but
did you ask for it?
No, sir. No history I asked.
Any history of vasculitis?
It's a vasculitis. Okay, sir.
If you're thinking of vasculitis, which vasculitis are you thinking of?
Medium or small vessel vasculitis like Henoch-Schönlein, Purpura, and polyarteritis.
The presentation is not like this, no?
Yes, sir. Usually they have blood in stools with joint pain, oral ulcers.
So which vasculitis are you thinking of? Where you have a distal small bowel involvement.
Distal
It's usually Behçet's disease.
Behçet disease. Okay.
So you should ask for the history of Behçet disease also.
Okay, sir.
What is the history you ask for that?
Any oral ulcers or genital aerial ulcers is there or not? I would like to ask. Joint pain.
You didn't tell me about the prevalence of new onset TB and treated TB, MDR. What is MDR TB?
When patient tuberculosis patient is resistant to two of the primary drugs like isoniazid and rifampicin and one second line drug.
What is XDR TB?
When patient is resistant to all primary drugs and the second line drugs, extreme drug resistant.
That's a little vague.
No, you should have INH plus rifampicin as well as one fluoroquinolones and one injectable aminoglycoside.
And one injectable, yeah, that is XDR. So the prevalence is usually in a new case, pulmonary 3%.
Okay, sir.
And in a treated case, treated patients is really, it's quite high. It's about 30-35%.
Okay, sir.
Yes. Okay.
Can you have combined tuberculosis and Crohn's?
Yes, can develop.
You can have
Yes,
first
sir.
diagnosis.
Okay, sir.
No, can you have? Yes or no?
Yes, sir. Patient can have, sir.
No, it doesn't happen. Why you get tuberculosis when you give anti-TNF?
Okay, sir. This anti-TNF will suppress the immunity which is active against tuberculosis.
Yeah. So primary, it won't combined disease won't be there. It can be latent TB can be there, which actually reactivates when you give anti-TNF.
Okay, sir.
Can we call the next candidate? Next is physical examination, no? Dr. Ashok?
Yeah, next is physical.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Praveen and Dr. Santosh.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, please
Yes,
take over. Dr. Santosh.
examination. On examination, weight is 57 kg. BMI is 18.9. Vitals are stable. No pallor, no pedal edema, no erythema nodosum, no lymph node enlargement. Oral cavity, no abnormality. Abdomen, inspection, scaphoid abdomen. Umbilicus is central. No visible mass, pulsation or peristalsis. Palpation, vague mass in right ilia fossa, 3 into 3 centimeter. Surface is regular and firm, mildly tender. No vertical movement, limited horizontal movement. Plane of swelling intra-abdominal, no other mass, liver and spleen not palpable. Percussion, mild impaired note over the swelling. Flank resonant, top space resonant, liver span is 12 centimeter. Auscultation, bowel sounds normal. External genitalia normal. Perineal area, indurated area of at 5 o'clock position with discharge of pus on pressure. PR, mild tenderness, track could not be felt. Other system, no abnormality.
Okay. The main finding here is the vague mass in the right iliac fossa.
Yes, sir.
So what is that mass? It's a very good description of the mass given.
Yes, sir.
So what are the organs probably that mass is arising from?
Yes, sir. Right iliac fossa, that is surface is irregular, firm and mild tender, most and with impaired note over the swelling. And most likely that this patient is looks like an inflammatory mass could be the possibility, first thing, considering the working diagnosis.
My question is, where is it arising from?
Probably ileum or cecum or appendicular or a lymph node mass or conglomerate mass, which could be the cause.
colon also, isn't it?
Feculent, yes, sir.
Colon,
Also.
yeah.
Yes.
So it could be, what is the composition of that mass? Is it only small bowel, or is it small and large, or is it something else also added?
Sir, this could be surface is slightly irregular and formed. So most likely that it might be a conglomerate mass, which probably involving bowel and surrounding area.
Surrounding area is what?
And
What is the
in the sense,
contents of that mass, composition or content
probably
of that mass?
peritoneum, omental, which might be omental component with probably bowel and the lymph nodes is possibilities.
Okay. It has bowel, it has got lymph node, it has probably got some mesentery.
Yes, sir.
And can it be an appendicular mass?
Possible, sir. Appendicular mass is also possible.
Why?
Completely cannot be excluded based on the physical finding. Even appendicular, probably appendicular lip, probably even contained abscess with probably he was treated with antibiotics and all, cold abscess, probably with inflamed, and it has developed the sequelae and mass formation. That is also a possibility.
Okay, we'll discuss a little more on that mass later.
Okay.
And the second finding here is the perianal area finding. Okay.
Yes, sir.
And you've actually heard the history.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what is your diagnosis after the history and examination?
Sir, based on the history and examination, it is chronic inflammatory small bowel diarrhea, probably Crohn's inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's disease versus tuberculosis has to be kept in mind,
No.
which is called.
When you start a diagnosis, it always starts with a little bit of syndromic diagnosis and then goes to the differential.
Yes, sir.
What is the most important symptom that we mentioned earlier? Is it the
Pain
diarrhea or is it the pain?
Pain
So
abdomen.
what is the syndromic diagnosis given for the pain?
Subacute intestinal, probably subacute intestinal obstruction.
Yeah, that's subacute intestinal, because when you go in for a differential straight away, you may be totally wrong.
Yes,
but
sir.
when you give the syndromic and then go to the differential, you have at least covered 50%.
Yes, sir.
So you are in a safer place.
Yes,
so subacute intestinal obstruction, probably distal small bowel obstruction.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, carry on. With
perianal,
small bowel
with
diarrhea and
perianal involvement in the form of perianal abscess, and with performance status, ECOG performance status of 1, status post ATT.
Also, now we have a new finding on examination. You have to include that.
Yes, sir. With the right hypochondrial mass, probably inflammatory
not
mass.
Right hypochondrial, right iliac fossa.
Right iliac fossa mass, probably inflammatory mass.
You think there is
Why do you say inflammatory?
Sir, the duration of symptoms is a long-term and younger age, and most of the time the symptoms irregular mass with this one. Most likely, it might be an inflammatory thing underlying etiology, which we are considering as a differential diagnosis for this particular patient.
There's a dual obstruction.
Madam, I couldn't hear, madam.
Do you think there is a dual obstruction?
I'm not very sure, madam. Sorry.
You cannot ignore the vomiting, no?
Dual.
So do you think there's a dual obstruction in this patient?
The vomit, no, madam. Most likely, this patient vomiting is more so like a distal small bowel type. So
you think that this is the type of vomiting you would get in distal small bowel obstruction?
Bilious with no, madam. Semi-digested food particles with mostly frequency is around 2 to 3 per week.
At the presentation of a distal small bowel obstruction is my question.
Yeah, if you're madam is asking if you're considering ileocecal region, basically at the distal ileum.
Yes, madam. Yes, sir.
Do you have a bilious obstruction? Do you have a bilious vomiting?
No, with the vomitus in distal ileum.
most of the times partially semi-digested food particles with sometimes even fecal and vomitus might be present.
So I'm asking you, do you think, is there a dual obstruction, one proximal and one distal?
The thing is, in your diagnosis, I mean, are you thinking of, can you get 2 areas of obstruction in whatever you're thinking of?
It can happen. I mean, presently, I'm not able to clearly say whether there is a dual obstruction, but most likely I'm thinking in terms of a single obstruction.
Okay, we'll move on. Okay, carry on. Then, yeah, where did we stop? Your differential diagnosis. No, your syndromic diagnosis was not at all properly given, because you must first give what we said earlier in the history, and with that you have to add the finding where you have a mass in the right iliac fossa.
Yes.
It is difficult to say whether it is an inflammatory mass, whether it's a malignant mass from the examination. Isn't it? Can you say whether it's inflammatory or malignant?
Presently, most likely inflammatory, considering the age and benignity of the presentation and longer duration of history.
No. I'm talking about the mass. But just on the basis of the mass, it's very difficult to say.
Very difficult.
So why do you want to bring another word called inflammatory there and make things difficult for you? You can just say a mass in the right iliac fossa as part of the syndrome. If you are sure what type of mass, that's different.
Okay.
Okay, don't bring unnecessary things to confuse, which will lead into more questions for you.
Okay, sir. Okay.
And then what is the, continue with the diagnosis in the differential diagnosis?
Other differential diagnosis will be tuberculosis of intestinal tuberculosis. And
First diagnosis?
Still
tuberculosis. First diagnosis tuberculosis.
First is still Crohn's disease, considering that he has completed ATT course and is still asymptomatic even after this one. There was a mild improvement, and presently worsening of symptoms of all suggest that Crohn's disease is the my first possible diagnosis. Second possible diagnosis is still a tuberculosis, since he was positively made a diagnosis of tuberculosis and he was treated. Though multi-drug resistant tuberculosis is not very common in testing, but still a possible diagnosis which has to be kept in mind. Third possible diagnosis could be a vasculitis, most likely Behçet's syndrome, which probably didn't respond to the ATT and still presenting with the symptoms. But the negative aspect of this one is the patient doesn't have any other articular or recurrent oral or genital ulcers. So this is a negative aspect. And the fourth possible diagnosis will be still a lymphoma, which has to be kept in mind. Negative aspect about this is like considering age, slightly unlikely, uncommon in this particular younger age, and the longer duration with only the intestinal manifestation so far.
Which lymphoma presents as diarrhea?
IPSID can present.
Is IPSID the site correlating with the IPSID diagnosis?
No, sir. Usually it affects the proximal small bowel. Sir. Usually this particular distal small bowel usually diffuse large cell lymphomas most common.
Wow.
That even if you put it, you should give the reasons why you don't think. Like one of the things that is there, which you are not at all including into your reasons, is he's got a perianal abscess.
Yes, sir. Perianal abscess.
So that is a very strong point for you, yes, towards your first diagnosis.
Yes, sir.
And it is also a good point against the other diagnosis.
Yes, sir.
And if you say lymphoma, it's usually diarrhea plus. This is an IPSID lymphoma, which can produce obstruction also.
Yes, sir.
But that is more proximal than distal involvement. So you have to give the explanations as to why. But at the same time, it is good to mention it, because a differential should be larger and more encompassing. No, it should encompass
Yes.
a lot, because unless you keep it there, you don't,
Yes, sir.
you will not evaluate for it. But you have to
Yes.
give the reasons why you have put it last or towards the end.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I think anything else on the diagnosis?
Diagnosis. Performance status and nutrition.
Yeah.
Performance
What
status
about
is
nutrition? You didn't mention anything about nutrition.
Nutrition is
What is the
presently
BMI?
BMI is 18.9, slightly lower normal range. Yes, sir. And other there is no micronutrition, macronutrition deficiency as per physical examination.
Yeah, because the diagnosis now after the examination should be complete. So you should
Yes,
have
sir.
also given that he has
Yes,
got malnutrition.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Because your job was mainly diagnosis. Yeah, I'll ask you a few questions.
Yes, sir.
Suppose a person, I think you answered many of it. Suppose a person comes with subacute intestinal obstruction with diarrhea.
Yes,
What are the differentials that you will think of?
Crohn's disease, tuberculosis, and eosinophilic gastroenteritis, and lymphomas, and radiation enterocolitis, even drug-induced, especially NSAID enteropathy possible, and ischemia, segmental ischemia with they can also have diarrhea with this one. And even recurrent diverticulitis with this, and they also can present with probably diarrhea with obstruction.
That will be an acute obstruction, a different type of obstruction.
Yes,
there is a diverticular perforation. Okay, next is
what are the type? Just what are the types of eosinophilic enteritis?
Eosinophilic enteritis is based on the layer, mucosal, submucosal, serosal involvement.
So when will you get obstruction and when will you get diarrhea?
So usually patient with a muscular involvement will have obstruction as a features. Serosal will have ascites as a predominant and pain as a predominant. Mucosal involvement, most likely they can have a diarrhea as a predominant symptom.
So how common is two sites, means mucosal and muscular involvement in eosinophilic enteritis?
Usually, most of the time, it will be having pan layer involvement.
No, pan involvement is not then you should get ascites in all patients. No?
Ascites. Okay. I don't know the frequency. Sorry, I'm not aware.
So it is usually only one of the layers is involved. So combined involvement of intestinal obstruction and diarrhea is not very common in eosinophilic enteritis.
Yes, sir. Okay.
Is there any mechanism where a muscular involvement can produce diarrhea?
Hypertrophy of muscular hypertrophy can cause.
No, when you say not hypertrophy of the muscle, how will it cause diarrhea?
It can cause, it stimulates the neuroendocrine cells, and it can cause, because of inflammation and edema.
Yeah. This is imagination running wild. No, it doesn't cause like that. It can cause bacterial overgrowth. In an obstructed segment, you can have bacterial overgrowth and diarrhea. That's the only way. But normally, this, as Dr. Syed said, it is one of the layers that is usually involved.
Yes, sir.
Okay. This patient has got a perianal disease. Well, what do you think that perianal disease is after examination?
It looks like an abscess which has ruptured. The testicular tract.
So when the abscess opens up, what do you call it?
Sinus tract.
So this guy had a perianal, if he's got possibly a perianal fistula.
Yes, sir.
You need to know what are the causes of perianal fistula. What are the causes of perianal fistula?
Perianal fistulas could be most One is infective like tuberculosis and other inflammatory like Crohn's disease, and very rarely even
Is that
So what is the
first
commonest cause of
cause?
perineal fistula?
Crohn's disease, post
Commonest.
abscess which has ruptured, perineal abscess which probably ruptured. That is the most common cause.
Then, what are the other causes?
Other causes are like inflammatory bowel disease, mainly Crohn's disease, more than ulcerative colitis. And tuberculosis, very rarely 1 to 2% can have involvement of perineal involvement, lymphomas, and
Lymphoma, no.
at post surgery,
Not lymphoma.
post surgery, post surgery,
Radiation,
radiation. Yes.
pelvic radiation. Then,
Pelvic radiation.
sometimes foreign bodies which are put into
Foreign
the
bodies. Foreign bodies.
Then, in immunocompromised people,
Yes, sir.
you can get fungal infections,
Yes, sir.
actinomyces.
Actinomyces can cause complex.
You need to know the other causes also, because it may not be always Crohn's.
Yes, sir.
So now we have finished the clinical part of it. So how do you differentiate TB from Crohn's disease
Yes, sir.
clinically on a history and examination?
Clinically, Crohn's disease will be having one duration of symptomatology will be way longer than compared to tuberculosis. And presence of
When you say way longer, what does TB, how? Give some numbers, approximate numbers.
Tuberculosis usually months. Crohn's disease usually might have years of months to years as a presentation, duration of symptoms. And usually, fever with the night sweats usually more prominent, and fever as a predominant symptoms with the night sweat is in tuberculosis compared to Crohn's disease. And usually extrapulmonary, usually pulmonary involvement with family history or past history usually favors in terms of tuberculosis. Clinically significant ascites also is favors tuberculosis over Crohn's disease. Perianal involvement usually favors in terms of Crohn's disease.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Dr. Varghese,
Can you have family history in Crohn's disease?
Crohn's disease family history is there. Monozygotic twins have 40 to 60% incidence of Crohn's disease, 10 times more risk than the general population.
okay.
Yes, I
Varghese,
thought you were going to ask
are
something.
we going to the investigation to the same person?
Yeah, I think you can ask how you investigate and then look at the available investigations.
For the same person, yeah, okay. You can go through, these are the previous investigations. Go through it.
Okay. Hemoglobin of 10.2, total count is 11,500. Polymorphs of 87%, and platelet is 4,02,000. ESR is 56. CRP is 18. So if sugars are normal, creatinine is normal, LFT, total bilirubin is 0.8 and 0.2, OT 34, PT 45. Serum alkaline phosphatase is 121 international unit. Albumin is 3.1, globulin is 6.4, and there is a AG reversal. Hepatitis B, C, and HIV is negative. Montauk's test is negative. Chest X-ray within normal limit. Okay. Considering this available CT abdomen, circumferential thickening of cecum, and terminal ileum of about 10 centimeter, narrow area of terminal ileum with mild proximal dilatation, enlarged mesenteric lymph node of 12 mm, mild proliferation of mesenteric fat and prominent vasa recta, no other bowel lesion, no ascites.
Okay.
This,
now this is the CT scan done earlier.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So
yes,
based on this CT, what does it look like? This CT, does it look like tuberculosis or does it look like Crohn's?
This particular CT most likely looks like a Crohn's disease, considering that prominent vasa recta, mild fast standing, And even the lymph node more than 12 mm usually suggests tuberculosis. Less than 12 or less usually favors more so in terms of Crohn's disease. This is indeterminate. We can't really conclude by the lymph node status. And even the length of involvement, usually single, only a cecum and terminal ileum is involved, and there is no other involvement. Still, Crohn's over TB and tuberculosis cannot be excluded based on the this finding alone.
I would say the other way around.
TB more.
Let me see whether we have what are the CCT features of TB versus Crohn's? The thickening, is it circumferential thickening is found where?
Circumferential thickening is more so in terms of Crohn's disease.
Oh, it's found in TB.
Tuberculosis.
Concentric circumferential thickening. Eccentric thickening is found in Crohn's.
Eccentric, yes, sir.
There is a point for TB.
Yes,
The enlarged node is again 12 millimeter, which is fairly significant.
yes, sir.
What other thing would you find in a TB node, mesenteric node? What is characteristic of TB?
Usually, necrotic lymph nodes more so favors tuberculosis over Crohn's disease.
The third point, mild proliferation of mesenteric fat,
Yes, sir.
is seen in TB also. But what do you normally get in Crohn's?
The Comstein sign will be there because of the vascular.
No, that is
and
different.
decrease in-
That is different. I'm talking about the mesenteric fat.
mesenteric fat standing.
Very
Circumferential.
significant
Creeping fat.
Yeah, creeping fat will be
Creeping.
there. And it will be significant. This is only a mild change which can also be seen in TB.
Yes, sir.
The vasa recta is
Yes,
only prominent. There
Yes,
it is a comb sign where it is a hypervascular
Yes, sir.
lesion. No ascites.
No, sir.
So you don't have, actually this is little more in favor of TB than for Crohn's, because you have a circumferential thickening. You have what is the ileocecal region? What is the characteristic of TB?
Patulous IC valve and destroyed cecum.
A shrunken, pulled up cecum,
Shrunken
IC valve completely destroyed and patulous.
Yes, sir.
And what about the length of strictures?
Usually, TB will have a short stricture, longer stricture more so favors in terms of Crohn's disease, and multiple stricture is also favors more so in terms of Crohn's disease.
I think I've got something. Yeah, strictures are concentric.
So can you go back? Apart from the finding which you prominent, can you find out something else here? Where else will you look for?
Look for other small bowel involvements, sir.
Okay, then. You should look at this.
We didn't hear it, Dr. Ismail. Can you repeat?
You should also look at the source area for any cold abscess. Basically, sometimes you can have source abscess. And also here you can see the sacroiliac joint. What about the left sacroiliac joint?
It is almost a few cells. The sacroiliac joint is more so, just looks like there is a.
So when you are shown a CT, look for other features also.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Carry on, sir.
Okay. This is, you can find it in any publication. I mean, what we went through is seen in intestinal TB versus Crohn's. You can look at the colonoscopy findings. Go through it.
It looks like a more ulceronodular disease of the cecum, extending down to mid-ascending colon with ulceration of ileocecal valve. Terminal ileum showed multiple circular ulcer, no skip lesion in colon. In this one,
what is this favor?
More so like a circular ulcers, more so favor in terms of tuberculosis, and even ulceronodular lesion in the cecum extending up to mid-ascending colon. That also, I mean, can favor both. Cecum is preserved, not destroyed, and yeah, so multiple.
No skip lesions.
No skip lesions. That also favors more so tuberculosis over Crohn's disease.
Okay. So I think you just went through it. What are the features that if it is Crohn's, what are the features we would have seen?
Usually, linear ulcers will be seen, and with the pseudopolyps predominantly, and with longer deep ulcerations, and more than 5 segmental involvements favors in terms of Crohn's disease.
So some more things are there.
These
Ileal
5
valve
segments. These 5 segments in the colon.
No, sir. And considering entire from
So the question here is, when you do colonoscopy, what are the features?
Linear ulcerations, pseudopolyps, deep ulcers, and rectal, usually relative sparing of the rectum, and perianal disease.
You can have cobblestoning. You can have
cobblestoning,
after ulcers, ulcers in the sigmoid.
Cobblestoning and other in area. Yes,
what are the types of tuberculosis, colonic involvement?
You mean phenotypic, ulcerative, hypertrophic, and hypertrophic, mixed type, 3 types.
There is a structurizing type also.
Structurizing type. Okay.
If you can find it. Now going to the histology.
Yes, sir.
You go through it.
Well-defined collections of epithelioid cell and lymphocyte, no caseation, occasional Langerhans giant cells, possible tuberculosis, gene expert is negative, interferon gamma for TB is negative, started on ATT for 9 months.
So this histology,
yes,
does it tell you it's TB? What is the classic histology for tuberculosis?
Usually caseated necrosis granuloma with epithelioid cell granuloma size of more than 400 micrometers favors tuberculosis, and finding of even acid fast bacilli.
Tell me more about the granulomas.
Granuloma is usually central caseating necrosis will be there. Epithelioid cell Langerhans giant cells will be seen, and usually size will be more than 400
Anything more?
Sir?
Tell me what other things are there in the granuloma.
And given number of granulomas, granuloma more than 5 favors in terms of Crohn's disease, microgranulomas. Usually less than 5 granulomas favors more so tuberculosis.
You said more number of granulomas, no? Multiple granulomas, confluent granulomas, large granulomas,
yes.
Caseation.
Yes, sir.
Submucosal granulomas.
How often do you see granulomas in TB?
Granulomas in TB, around 30%, sir.
Is it more common in TB or Crohn's?
Crohn's disease.
No, it's more common in TB.
No, it's tuberculosis.
Tuberculosis. And it's about 50-60%. You can see granulomas in TB. In Crohn's?
I'm not very sure about the percentage.
20 to 30%.
20 to 30%.
Yeah, so it's much more in tuberculosis.
Okay, sir.
So this histopathology, does it favor TB? Does it look like TB? What is there for TB on this report?
Langerhans giant cells, otherwise, and epithelioid cell, that can still happen even in the Crohn's disease more so. But otherwise, interferon gamma is a gene express is negative.
So tell me about the gene expert. How good a test is it?
Gene expert, usually if at all it is positive in a ileal biopsy, it should be considered in a clinical setting. It should be considered and treated as tuberculosis with an ATT. a trial of ABP should be definitely given. And usually it is seen in more so like 15 to 30% of the cases. It can even tuberculosis with they can still have gene expert might be still negative even in tuberculosis.
So what,
It need not
what
be
you,
like
you should have said it as, it is not very sensitive, but
Yes,
it
sir.
is fairly specific.
more specific. Yes.
How good is the Xigra test for TB?
Interferon gamma assay usually that if at all previous vaccinated, it can be a false positive, and usually other it usually detects the
Actually, I thought
latent
that is one of the
tuberculosis.
advantage. That is one of the advantages of the quantiferon gold test. That
Yes, sir.
even with ECG vaccinated people, it doesn't become positive
Yes, sir.
as compared to the MAN2 test. So
yes,
what you are saying is not correct.
Yes, sir. Latent tuberculosis you can detect with this one, and patient can be treated based on this interferon gamma assay.
I think it is more useful in the setting. Where is it useful? It is not very useful as a diagnostic test. Where is it
Yes,
more
sir.
useful?
More so when they're planning to start on biological for this patient for to start the prophylaxis for INH prophylaxis this one, to start as treat as a latent tuberculosis.
Professor Ashok, we are reaching 9:30.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
We'll go fast then.
We have to cover management also.
Yeah, we'll go to management. Before we go into management, we didn't see the latest reports of colonoscopy biopsy and which you have done. That was not supplied.
Yes,
Do we
sir.
have that? Orally, if you can tell us.
Does it have that? No, I think the colonoscopy again showed
Not there. Okay.
ulceronodular
We'll
disease.
go through.
Okay, the colonoscopy again showed ulceronodular disease of the cecum, ileocecal area, and ulcers in the terminal ileum. Some of the ulcers were, I think, more serpiginous, something like that. Biopsy again, small granulomas, AB smear negative, gene expert negative.
So we'll
So
go on
ulceronodular
to,
disease again with the granuloma.
We'll go on because time is getting short. We'll go to management. There's another person coming on.
Yeah, I think
yes, sir.
Another person coming, Kushan.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Santosh. Now, Dr. Kushan.
Thank you, sir.
From
Yes,
Apollo.
sir. Good evening, sir. Good evening, sir.
Okay, Dr. Kushan.
Yes, sir.
These are the three clinical problems.
Yes, sir.
As time is short, one is confirming the diagnosis.
Yes, sir.
Second is what will you do for the small bowel obstruction?
Yes, sir.
And what will you do for the perianal disease?
Yes, sir.
How are you going to manage? Before going into management, what other information do you want? Or we'll go into how do you
Sir,
confirm
at
the
this point of,
diagnosis?
I'd like to
I think
know
it's almost
about the
carry on. What else would
yes,
you
sir.
want?
Sir, since the colonoscopy has already been done to map the complete disease, the anatomical location of the disease, sir, I would go for a CT with enterography, sir, and also an upper GI endoscopy. And to know for the perianal disease, sir, and to know whether a complex fistula or a simple fistula is there, and MRI pelvis will be required, sir.
Would you like a CT enterography or an MR enterography?
Sir,
what is the sensitivity, specificity, or what do you prefer and why?
Sir, MR enterography will be preferred in this case, sir, because it will help us to differentiate whether the stricture is inflammatory or it is fibrotic, sir. It is better than CT enterography in that regard, sir.
What safety wise?
Safety wise, sir, since he is a young male, in that case also, sir, recurrent radiation exposure will be higher in CT, sir.
What else do you want? One is you need to map, you need to know what about the fistula. Next,
Yes.
what else do you want to know before you plan your management?
Sir, an upper GI endoscopy also, sir.
That you told. What else?
Uh,
Would you want to know about? Okay, this is finished. Recent. Okay. Would you want to? Okay, we'll just finish what you said. Okay. So essentially, I'll go through it. CT angiography was done. There was a circumferential thickening of the cecum, proximal ascending colon and terminal ileum, dilatation of the ileal segment dilatation of the small bowel proximal to the obstruction, prominent vasa recta and fibrofatty proliferation, few enlarged mesenteric nodes of 8 to 9 millimeter, no ascites. So this tells you that the disease is localized to the distal small bowel and the proximal colon. There is no proximal involvement.
Yes, sir.
And all the features suggest that it is
Yes,
Crohn's disease.
Yes,
This is the MRI pelvis. It says grade 1 perianal fistula. How do you classify perianal fistulas?
Sir, perianal fistulas are classified into simple and complex. The simple fistulas, the origin is low. They are not associated with any perianal abscess, sir. The complex fistula, the origin is high. They can be associated with perianal abscesses, and they might be having multiple external openings, sir.
What do you mean by low and high?
Sir, if it is like intersphincteric, it is likely to be low, sir. If it is
No. It is depending upon the internal fistulous opening, you know.
Okay, sir. Yes, sir.
So it is, if it is below the dentate line, it is low fistula, and if it is above the dentate line, it's high fistula.
Right, sir.
To achieve any, yeah, correct. The simple fistulas are only two. The superficial fistula, which is low down, and the intersphincteric fistula.
You can have intersphincteric, transsphincteric, suprasphincteric, as well as extrasphincteric.
That is complex fistula.
Yeah.
Complex fistulas are transsphincteric, suprasphincteric, extrasphincteric. They might have multiple openings, more chance of abscesses, multiple abscesses. Okay, anyway, that's
what is Goodsall's law rule? What's Goodsall's rule?
Sir, I'm not aware, sir.
Okay, go and read up.
Right.
Yeah.
Read up Das or Radial.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, because Goodsall's rule helps in management. And even what is this grading of fistulas, the type of fistulas is called after whom? It's called, there is a name. Park's classification. Okay. So just a few questions on the perianal. We'll go through fast. What is the prevalence of perianal fistula and Crohn's disease?
Sir, over the course of the entire Crohn's disease, 20% of the patients may develop perianal disease, sir.
Okay. Is it different from the West and East? West and Asia?
In the West, it is more common.
It's almost the same. 20. If the duration of disease is very long, then it will be a little more, but I don't think there's a major difference, although some articles do say that it's less here, but I don't think it is less. What are the perianal lesions in Crohn's disease?
Sir, they can be anal fissure, there can be, sir, external hemorrhoids, and there can be perianal fistula, perianal abscesses.
Tags, large tags.
Tags, yes, sir. That,
you can have stricture of the anal canal. You can have carcinoma.
Stricture.
Okay.
Anal carcinoma also is more common.
Okay.
How do you differentiate between simple anal fissure?
Yeah.
Common anal fissure and in Crohn's disease? How will you differentiate?
Between simple and complex, sir?
No. Fissure in Crohn's disease versus usual common garden variety fissure. How will you differentiate?
Position of the fissure?
Where is commonest fissure? Go and read up all this.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. What are the other causes of perianal fistulas? Quickly go through it. I think
yes,
we went through it
sir.
already.
I think we have gone
Yeah,
through
we went
that.
through it. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes,
This
sir.
we have gone
Classification
through.
also we have gone.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. This is the other thing I was asking you. What
Right.
other thing do you need to know before you plan management? How do you
So the
assess
assessment of
severity?
the severity, sir, Crohn's disease activity index we need to calculate, sir. And the other is the
Any
Bradshaw-Harvey
other
index, sir. Bradshaw-Harvey index, sir.
Okay. There are many indices. And
And,
these
Is it
two
the
that you
same for?
mentioned
Is
mainly
it the
depends
same for
upon.
perianal?
Sorry, sir.
Is it the same for perianal disease also? Or do we have a different severity index for perianal disease?
I think he has to go and read up.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this patient, what do you think is the natural history of the Crohn's disease in this patient? What do you think is going to happen? The young guy, what's going to happen over time? What do you think is the natural history?
Sir, this patient has ileocolonic disease and that is of a penetrating phenotype, sir.
No, why you are saying penetrating
Why
ileocolonic?
penetrating?
Sorry, sir, not penetrating because sir, perianal fistula was present, sir. So,
Okay, I'll ask you the next question. What are the poor prognostic
yes,
features
sir.
of Crohn's disease?
Yes, sir. So, young age, less than 40 years of age, sir. Extensive small bowel involvement, upper GI involvement, then deep rectal ulcers, penetrating or stricturizing phenotype, sir.
Then,
And the smoker also is considered a risk.
then perianal disease.
Perianal disease.
Okay. Multiple extra-intestinal manifestations. So all these. So in this guy, what do you think his natural history is going to be? Is going to be a
Sir, it's an
slow,
aggressive
easy
phenotype,
progress
sir.
or an aggressive disease?
It's an aggressive
It's an
phenotype,
aggressive.
sir. Yes, sir.
Does this help you in your management plan?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Because aggressive phenotypes are generally recommended for top-down therapy, sir.
Okay. So these are three things, as we said, that we have to manage: management of active disease, management of strictures, and management of perianal fistula. So how will you manage it?
Sir, regarding the first question, sir, the management of active disease, sir. Since the patient is a young patient and associated with other features suggestive of aggressive phenotype, and I will be considering this patient for a top-down therapy, in which case I will be planning to give him biologicals, either infliximab or adalimumab. And before considering him for biologicals, sir, I would he has already been worked up for latent tuberculosis, but an X-ray was done, sir. I would also like to go for an HRCT test for latent tuberculosis, sir. Secondly, HBV was negative, but IgM anti-HBC also needs to be done, sir. And third thing is that we'll have to vaccinate the patient, sir, before starting him on biologics, sir. So for vaccination, sir, the inactivated vaccines can be given at present, and the live vaccines need to be given at least 4 to 6 weeks before starting him on biologics, sir. And if we are planning to start him on infliximab, in that case, sir, azathioprine needs to be added, in which case the dose has to be started as 25 to 50 milligram. And then depending on the tolerance, it needs to be increased to 2 to 2.5 milligram per kilogram, sir. If we are giving him adalimumab, in that case, sir, azathioprine need not be given, sir.
What do you know of any data on strictures and TNF alpha agents, inhibitors? What happens to these strictures?
Sir, in inflammatory strictures, it responds to anti-TNF alpha, sir.
You don't know anything else?
Sir, fibrotic strictures, they will not respond, sir.
No, that is true. But there are some articles, initial articles said when you give TNF alpha agents, patients develop strictures.
Okay, sir.
But your data is a bit doubtful, but that should be kept in mind.
Basically, if you have an inflammatory stricture, it will respond. That's why MRI scores over CT angiography. And you have seen the CT angiography here. What do you think the stricture due to? Is it inflammatory or fibrostenotic stricture?
Sir, they had just given circumferential thickness, sir.
No. You have seen the picture, no?
Yes, sir.
The picture showed mucosal enhancement.
Inflammatory.
So it is more likely an inflammatory stricture.
Inflammatory. Yes, sir.
But if you have a serious fibrostenotic stricture, it's basically a relative contraindication for the anti-TNF.
The other thing in anti-TNF is that even if it's an inflammatory stricture, there are some early data which shows that healing of those inflammatory strictures produced fibrotic strictures. This was the problem. But I think now, so there was some question in stricturizing disease, should we give it or should we not? But I think now it's what science says that inflammatory strictures you can give. But of course, permanent fibrostenotic strictures, any form of treatment doesn't help. How do you treat fibrostenotic strictures?
Sir, there are two approaches. One is the endoscopic and another is the surgery, sir. So in endoscopic, sir, stricturoplasty can be performed if the length of the stricture is less than 4 centimeters, and if there are, less than 4 strictures and which are close to each other, sir. If the long strictures are there and they are spread across more number of segments, in that case, surgery will be required, sir.
What is the recurrence rate after endoscopic balloon dilatation? And what is the percentage of patients who ultimately go to surgery?
Sir, approximately, 60 to 70% of the patients will require surgery, sir.
Yeah.
What is endoscopic stricturotomy?
Stricturotomy, sir, an incision is made endoscopically, sir, over the stricture.
So results are better for stricturotomy, no? Endoscopic.
Yes, sir.
And why did you say you will give anti-TNF? Why not vedolizumab here? It is more gut specific.
Yes, sir. Since it is available, that can also be considered, sir.
No. It is wrong. Because this patient has got perianal disease, it is better to give anti-TNF, which has got better response.
Yes, sir.
Suppose this patient has got arthritis, what will you give?
Sir, adalimumab will be better, sir, in that case.
Why adalimumab? Again, both anti-TNF, infliximab.
Yes, sir.
Or adalimumab.
Yes, sir.
How do you manage the perianal fistula? Type 1?
Sir, yes, sir. Sir, since it is a simple fistula, sir, I'll start him on antibiotics and also a set-on placement, sir. Antibiotics in the form of either ciprofloxacin or metronidazole, sir.
How long will you give the antibiotic?
Sir, at least for 4 weeks, sir.
4 to 6 weeks. And why do you put a ceton?
Sir, it helps in making the tract fibrous and therefore it helps healing, sir.
It helps to drain the purulent material.
Will you put a cutting ceton or a non-cutting ceton?
Sir, since this is a low, in the cutting ceton can be placed, sir.
You won't usually put cutting ceton in Crohn's disease. Suppose this patient has got isolated, this patient basically has a ileocecal region involvement, and
Yes,
it is a stricturizing lesion. If you go for surgery, how will you follow up this patient?
Yes, sir. Sir, after the surgery, the patient, since he has high risk features, he needs to be given azathioprine plus or minus 5 amino salicylic acid, and then 6 months later,
There is no role for 5-SAR.
Yes, sir. And 6 months later, he needs to be taken up for ileocolonoscopy, sir. And based on the Rutgers score, the subsequent management will be decided, sir. So if it is like I0 or I1, in that case, he may continue with the azathioprine, sir. But if it is like more than I2, in that case, sir, biologics will be required, sir, if it has already not been started before.
Yeah. I think you're done, Verghese. I think Verghese is
The
gone.
background, I don't know, still there. Dr. Philip Augustine, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay,
There's quite
please
an extra.
tell us about you have
Yeah.
gone through the saga of treating ileocecal tuberculosis or colonic tuberculosis,
Yes.
tuberculosis, and then later you have seen both ends. Please.
Yeah. I think actually it's an exhaustive discussion regarding the clinical teaching, right from history, diagnosis, and management. I thought I'll just focus on that one point where you should have treated this patient initially with anti-tuberculous drugs. Now we see around 5 to 6 new cases of Crohn's disease every month. And from our experience over the last 2-3 decades, which runs into more than 2,000 cases of Crohn's disease, what I have found is, you can probably make a 90% accurate diagnosis of Crohn's disease based on the history. As a young patient with weight loss and perianal disease, then histology, the granulomas we already exhaustively discussed, then a few add-on things like increased amount of platelets, and fecal calprotectin. And for some reason, CRP is not that elevated in tuberculosis, and is very highly elevated in Crohn's disease. And your gene expert and other things, they don't really add up to anything. CT enterography has a very prominent role in diagnosing, as we already said, the vascular lesions and fat stranding and all that. And CT enterography with that curvy linear reconstruction will tell you whether the stricture is going to be with infliximab and other biologicals, as Dr. Ashok Jagab mentioned. The disease heals fast, then it becomes fibrotic. That is one reason why biologicals precipitate this. So you can actually gauge whether it is a critical stricture or not. It is important to find out the criticality of the stricture. And we use MR enterography if there is visualizing disease. Otherwise, CT enterography is our mainstay. So with these, and of course, we have very competent and confident histopathological team. They play a very major role in deciding whether we can straight away go for Crohn's disease treatment or not. And our main stay of treatment is azathioprine. We started early in the management, right from the beginning. And if there is any, chance of getting strictures like that, we may go in for influx. Whether there is a fistulizing disease, we go for biologicals. Fibrotic strictures, you need to do some kind of intervention. We don't have much experience with endoscopic interventions. We rely on surgery. It's generally said that about 1/3 of Crohn's disease patients will have one surgery during their lifetime. But our early intervention with immunosuppression, we have less than 10% going for surgical treatment. So that's a few practical guidelines for future gastroenterologists. Otherwise, we have done the clinical and investigative discussions very thoroughly. Thank you for asking me to join this saga. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Philip Augustine, for that pearls of wisdom. And sorry for keeping you waiting for such a long time.
No
This was an exhaustive discussion. And I think the case actually needed such sort of a discussion.
Yeah, I also learned a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, all of us have learned a lot. So thank you, Professor Ashok. It was a wonderful discussion, very elaborate, and I think our students would have benefited a lot. Thank you, Dr. Ismail. You also contributed a lot. And Jayanti ma'am, thank you very much. And I thank all the other faculty members and all the students who have joined for today's discussion. We look forward to further participation. Next Thursday, we have a case-based scenario on space occupying lesion